Good evening and welcome. President Donald Trump has confirmed that the United States is withdrawing from the Paris Climate Change Accord. In the past few minutes, President Trump said he was pulling out in America's economic interest and would negotiate a new deal on terms that were fair to the United States. Let's go to Washington now, from where we're joined by our correspondent, Katrina Perry. Katrina.
Well, the president's decision was well flagged, and today he fulfilled a campaign promise by announcing that he was withdrawing the United States from that landmark Paris Climate Accord with immediate effect. He had promised that many times on the campaign trail, equating withdrawing from the deal with a boost to the American economy, and he continued that theme today. He's still in the Rose Garden at the White House, continuing to make that announcement as we speak. He said he was putting America first and that the climate accord was unfair to the United States at the highest levels.
In order to fulfill my solemn duty to protect America and its citizens, the United States will withdraw from the Paris Climate Accord Thank you. Thank you. But begin negotiations to re-enter either the Paris Accord or in really entirely new transaction on terms that are fair to the United States, its businesses, its workers, its people, its taxpayers.
Katrina, in the past few minutes, President Trump said he was elected to represent the people of Pittsburgh, not Paris. So despite pleas from some of those around him, from countries like China, he's going ahead with this withdrawal.
Absolutely, and it's very much in the vein of Donald Trump's presidency, this protectionism, this America First philosophy. He said that the Paris Climate Accord punished the United States, and he very much focused in on the elements to do with the economy and with jobs, speaking less, in fact, about the impact on the environment and what the Paris Climate Accord actually has at its core. He said that it was costing the United States around 2.7 million lost jobs. He singled out the Green Fund that's part of the accord, that the US has pledged $3 billion to help less well-off countries scale up their environmental policies. $1 billion of that was paid over during the Obama administration. Those payments are to stop now, President Trump said. And in somewhat of a sop, you might say, to his daughter Ivanka Trump, not only did the president say he was withdrawing from the Paris Climate Accord, but he said that he might get back into it, that he wanted to renegotiate things, make it not so unfair as he sees it to the United States, because there had been all of this toing and froing within the administration, pressure being put on him by Ivanka, by his son-in-law Jared Kushner, Secretary of State Rex Tillerson, all of whom wanted to stay in the Paris Climate Accord. But the more vocal side of the West Wing has won out, it appears, that being the administrator of the Environmental Protection Agency, Pruitt, and also Steve Bannon, both of whom were very much of the opinion that the US did not belong in the Paris Climate Accord.
Now, you mentioned former President Obama. Even before President Trump had finished speaking, President Obama's reaction was already appearing on the wires.
Indeed, well, as we know, the president's decision was well flagged, and President Obama emailed out his statement to those of us on his mailing list within about 2 minutes of President Trump starting to speak. He said that in the decision today, President Trump had rejected the future, and he said, former President Obama said that he hoped states, cities and businesses would step up where the administration was leaving off, and that they would continue their pledges to engage in renewable energies and to continue to do what they could to reduce emissions.
Katrina Perry in Washington, thank you. Well, in a boost for the Paris Agreement, Chinese and EU leaders are set to agree a joint statement backing it. China, which is the world's second biggest polluter, has said it will honour commitments to the deal.
Scientists are warning today that a rapidly growing rift in the Antarctic ice shelf is now very close to finally calving off. And if it does, it could produce one of the biggest icebergs ever recorded. The rift is already 200 kilometres long and has grown by about 16 kilometres in the past week and a half alone. It is events like this and the global warming that it's linked to that the Paris Agreement on climate change was aimed at addressing. It is 18 months since this historic and unprecedented agreement was reached among 196 nation-states. Included is a commitment to limit global warming to well below 2 degrees and as close as possible to 1.5 degrees Celsius. For all countries to take action to stop emissions rising as soon as possible and rapidly reduce them and progressively increase their commitments every 5 years. For developed countries to provide $100 billion per year for poorer countries affected by climate change and more after 2025. And there are legally binding rules, including expert reviews, to hold countries to account. But Donald Trump has never been a fan, and his announcement tonight that he is withdrawing the United States from the Paris Climate Agreement will send shockwaves around the world.
I think this is a sad day for Americans who are keen to move to a fossil-free and renewable energy future. We have seen exponential job growth in America in the solar panel industry, and I don't think that a lot of people working in the solar industry are prepared to move into coal mines for their jobs.
Chinese and EU leaders are set to agree a joint statement backing the Paris Agreement. Chancellor Angela Merkel, who met with the Chinese Premier Li Keqiang earlier today, said Europe and China will work together to honour their commitments on climate change. There is a broad consensus that the Paris Agreement can survive an American withdrawal. However, there is no doubt that the decision of Donald Trump today to withdraw the United States from the agreement has done significant damage and is a setback to global attempts to tackle climate change.
And George joins us now in studio. George, just how damaging is this decision to the whole agreement?
I think it's very damaging because Americans' involvement was so crucial in bringing everybody together, because there are so many countries who were involved. Remember, there's only, as the Irish government would point out this evening, Nicaragua and Syria were the only 2 countries not involved for their own various reasons, brought to a table for the first time ever in human history to agree on one thing. There were all sorts of arguments with regard to what was fair for each country because they're at different stages of development, and for such a linchpin to pull out of it after it has been agreed 18 months on, that is damaging, and everybody else will try and make the most of it, but there's no doubt that that is significant. 82% of global emissions had been signed up for, the countries responsible for that up until now, with 146 countries, 7 countries. Now it's down to 146 and it's down to 70% of global emissions. It is bad.
Can we take any comfort from the fact that some individual states like California have said they'll pursue their commitments?
I think we can take great comfort from that, because it shows that there will be many, many people in the United States who will think that they have to live up to their responsibilities. Countries, rich and poor, large and small, have been asked to do it, and the Americans, a lot of them will want to play their part too. So that is a good thing in terms of emissions. Efforts will be continued in those big cities like Washington, Los Angeles, New York and Boston. But the big problem is the money. One of the big things about getting everybody together was countries who weren't very wealthy had to do very big things, and they also had to deal with the damage which has already been caused by 150 years of emissions from rich countries. So there were compensation things and exchanges which would help them to deal with it. That was the fund of €110 million per year. America was important. Pulling America out of that takes away the glue, and that does have serious consequences, and it allows other countries to wriggle out and use it as an excuse to wriggle out of very difficult challenges and commitments that they've given. There's nothing good about what America has done tonight or what Donald Trump has done tonight.
OK, George Lee, thank you.